Hi, welcome to CPET. This video is going to go over the lab safety rules. It is important to know these because we don't want any problems because you didn't know the expectations. Several of these would also be important rules to go over with your own students if you're teaching chemistry or physics related concepts in the upper elementary classroom. They will definitely not know these rules, and so it's important to share them with them ahead of time and explain the rationale behind the rules. So Lab Safety 101, you will need to acknowledge these rules before next class period. First of all, be prepared for lab. You should read the instructions before you begin any lab, whether I hand it to you in class or whether I've provided that ahead of time. You need to read through the instructions completely before you begin. Follow the procedures on that lab. Do not go rogue. Do not start thinking, I wonder what would happen if I put this in here instead, or if I added more of this. Curiosity is a good thing, but not in labs. You can ask about it, but do not just do it on your own. Follow the expectations and the procedures and the exact amounts that the lab gives. And finally, always work with a partner. You don't do labs alone. You always have a partner so that if something happens, the other person could get help, clean up the spill, do whatever is necessary. No food or drink during labs. You shouldn't be eating, shouldn't be drinking, shouldn't even be chewing gum. That is not something that happens during labs. Any food or drink items that are in the area while there's a lab going on. So for example, we use baking soda for some of our labs. That baking soda then becomes lab supplies and cannot be used for anything that would actually be eaten. It goes in our lab supplies closet. Know the exits. There's only two in this module, but you need to know where they are, which one you would use for which kinds of situations. Also know where the safety equipment is. Things like water, fire blankets, fire extinguisher, anything that you might need to know. Look around, make sure you know where it is. If you don't know where it is, ask me. You need to be aware of where any safety equipment that you might need is located in our classroom. Dress safely. Think about what could get in the way or be unsafe. So this is one that you are less likely to think about, but when we're doing labs, you should be wearing closed-toed shoes. You shouldn't be wearing sandals because if something splashed, it could get on your feet. You should, for some of them, you're going to need to wear some sort of apron. I'll provide those and I'll tell you when those are necessary. You should have your hair pulled back. If it's long hair, think about it. If you're doing an experiment and it's hanging over, it could get in the way. You could get something in it. If we're doing fire, it could catch on fire. We don't want any of those things happening. So if you have long hair, have it pulled back. No long jewelry, so not like clunky bracelets or things that could easily get caught. And don't have really long flowy sleeves. Have something you can push up, something that's not going to continually hang down and get in the way. So we're going to need goggles sometimes. I'll tell you when, but let's think about why. We need goggles when we're working with chemicals of pretty much any sort because you get chemicals in your eyes, it's not going to end well. We're going to need to rinse it out, and sometimes they can cause permanent damage. So pretty much anytime we're working with chemicals, we're going to use goggles. We're also going to use it whenever we're doing glassware with experiments inside, because if something went wrong and that glassware broke, you do not want to get pieces of glass in your eyes. Guys, this has happened in an actual high school classroom near me. The teacher was doing an experiment up front. She didn't have the kids wearing goggles. The experiment went wrong, and one of the kids got pieces of glass embedded in their eye. So no, you want to wear goggles whenever there's glassware involved, if you're the one doing it, or if the teacher is the one doing it and kids are watching. Everybody should be wearing goggles. And then we have heat. If you're doing anything with lab burners and there's going to be heat involved, you want to have the protective goggles on. If there's accidents, okay, life happens, right? If there are any accidents, if there's spills, you need to report them. And this classroom is going to be to me. You need to report them immediately. Let me know what happened. And then we need to clean it up. So I will give you information. Sometimes I'll clean it up. Sometimes I'll have you clean it up, and I'll tell you the correct and safe way in order to do it. We never leave chemicals spilled. We never just ignore it when something like that happens. Chemical splashes. Okay, so if we're working with a chemical and it does splash, what do? You're going to let me know right away, and we're going to start rinsing it. If it's in your eye, you'll go underneath in an eye washing center and we'll rinse it that way. If it's on your hands or any other part of your skin, you're going to rinse that skin immediately. Then we're going to remove. Okay, so if you have contact lenses, you're going to remove your contact lens if you're able. If it's on your skin and it's on part of your sleeve too, I'm going to cut off that part of your sleeve. We're going to remove any part of your clothing or contact lenses, anything that we can remove that came in contact with that chemical. And then we're going to rinse some more. And then we're going to have to evaluate and see if it, depending on how serious the chemical splash was, depending on what it looks like, if it's still irritated. If it's serious enough, that would be the point where you go get more medical care. But first we rinse, remove, and rinse. Read the labels. When we're working with chemicals, it's important for you to be aware of what we're working with. Read the labels if they give them to you. Know what kind of chemical you're handling and know the hazards involved. Some of the chemicals we're going to need to be a lot more careful with than others. You know, baking soda generally by itself isn't that dangerous, but other ones might be more so. They might be flammable. Look at the labels, know what is in your hand, what you're working with. PPE, personal protective equipment. So this is going to vary depending on the experiment used, but there are a lot of different ones that could be used. Goggles are the most common. Those are going to be used in most experiments. We already talked about when. Gloves are very common. If you're working with any sort of chemical, if you're going to be touching it, you're probably going to be using gloves. Sometimes we're going to need to use a lab coat or apron. There are other more intense experiments for which some of these other things on the screen might be needed. They are not likely to be needed in our classroom, but you should be aware of them. When you're measuring out chemicals, so there's going to be a lot of experiments where I tell you to take a certain amount of a chemical and mix it with something else, for example. Only remove what you need from the original container. Don't take out extra. Take out exactly what you need. And if there is, for some reason, a leftovers, do not put it back because it could be contaminated. When we're disposing of chemicals, follow my directions. Do not put it in the trash or the sink unless I instruct you to. There are some chemicals in which that is fine and safe and a good way to dispose of them. There are others that it is not. So follow whatever directions I give you. Don't, and if you don't know how and I haven't told you or you didn't hear, ask. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but it's good to be reminded of. You need to keep all flammable liquids away from heat, sparks, and open flames. So first of all, you need to know if it's flammable. That goes back to reading the labels or listening if I told you it was. And then we need to be very careful about keeping it away from anything that could set it on fire. Laboratory burners, safety first. Again, hair and clothes. Hair needs to be pulled back, sleeves need to be rolled up. Don't have anything that's going to hang down and could accidentally get by the laboratory burner. Never leave a lit burner unattended. Always turn the burner or the hot plate off when not in use, even if you think you're coming right back to it. Either one of you or your partner stays by it or you turn it off. We do not leave it unattended ever. And then assume it's still hot. If you have the Bunsen burner or if you have any sort of glass that we heated up, if you have a hot plate, assume it is still hot. We'll give it time to cool. And even then, when we move it, we're going to use gloves and insulated placemats and not just assume that, oh, it's been 10 minutes, it's cool enough. No, we're always going to assume that it's still hot and give it plenty of time to cool. Before you begin experiments with the laboratory glassware, examine them for chips, for cracks. Don't use anything that's defective because it could potentially, the experiments could put more pressure on it and it could crack further, it could shatter, it could chip apart. So we need to be careful that way. Before you use it, just check it. Never handle broken glass with your bare hands. We have a broom. We'll use the broom and dustpan to clean that up, but do not try to clean it up with your bare hands. In general, be in the moment. Be aware of your surroundings. Be focused on the experiment. Don't be daydreaming. Don't be thinking about what's happening next class period. You need to be present during labs, present mentally as well as physically. You need to be aware of what's going on and think about what you're doing. And then when you're done, you need to wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water before you leave the lab. Even if you think you're not you didn't work with anything that was toxic that day, even if you think, well, I'm not going to eat right away, no matter what it is, no matter what we did that day, we always wash our hands thoroughly with soap and water before we leave. And that is the end of the lab rules. Please think about these. Again, these are for us, for our class, but they're also going to be important things for you to consider when you start doing any sorts of labs or experiments in your own classroom someday. So you need to acknowledge that you have watched this video, that you understand and agree to the lab rules before next class period. See you there.